Right, this video we're going to talk about what we call carbon compounds or organic compounds. We're going to identify elements that carbon bonds with to make up life's molecules, make up the carbon compounds. We're going to talk about the functions of the four major groups of macromolecules or carbon compounds. So carbon is a unique atom. It can form up to 4 covalent bonds with other atoms. But in organic molecules, it bonds to things like hydrogen and oxygen primarily, but also things like phosphorus and sulfur and nitrogen to make up the 4 different types of organic compounds. And you can see some examples here. You can see that there's methane. It's got a single bond for each carbon. Acetylene has a triple bond for the central carbons. Double bonds. So again, you can see kind of that this different structure leads to different functions of these molecules as well. So you have some that are chains, some that are rings, and some that are branching chains are the different basic structures of these compounds. So a macromolecule is a large organic molecule that's found in living things. Sometimes we call them carbon compounds, sometimes we call them organic molecules. And they're formed by taking a bunch of small subunits and putting them together to make these polymers through a process called polymerization. So the monomers are the building blocks, and the polymers are the big, large molecules. So a monomer is the small subunits or building blocks of a macromolecule. A polymer is a large molecule made up of many monomers. So the first class of carbon compounds we're going to look at are carbohydrates. Living things use carbohydrates as a source of energy and for structural purposes to make things up. They're made up of only 3 kinds of atoms: carbons, hydrogens, and oxygen, usually in a ratio of 1 to 2 to 1, carbons, hydrogens to oxygens. They make up things like sugars, starch, glycogen, which is a storage form of sugar for animals, and chitin, which is a structural protein. Makes up the exoskeleton of insects and other animals. So here you can see the monomers and the polymers there to build a starch molecule. So the monomers of carbohydrates are called monosaccharides, mono meaning one and saccharide meaning sugar. And a polymer is called a polysaccharide, many sugars combined together like starch. So lipids are a large and varied group of macromolecules, not generally soluble in water. Most are made of carbon and hydrogen and some oxygen, and maybe some other things in there as well, depending on which kind of lipid we're talking about. Fats and oils and waxes, they make up cell membranes and things like that as well. So this diagram here, you can see lots of hydrogens and carbons there. So you have, this is a triglyceride, is which type of lipid this is. You got a glycerol molecule and 3 fatty acids combined to it. So with triglycerides, you can have saturated and unsaturated fats. So if all the bonds are single bonds between the carbons, then that's a saturated fat. The unsaturated fats have double carbon bonds. Changes that are characteristic. Saturated fats tend to be solids at room temperature. They tend to be a little bit less healthy to eat in our diet, whereas unsaturated fats tend to be liquids at room temperature, a little bit healthier for us. Another type of carbon compound are the nucleic acids. Nucleic acids are polymers made up of nucleotides. You can see a picture of a nucleotide here. DNA, RNA, and ATP are examples of nucleic acids. They're all basically made up of a sugar, which is the gray symbol there, a phosphate group, which is the blue circle, and some type of nitrogen base, which is the green symbol there. So you get your 5-carbon sugar, your phosphate group, and your nitrogenous base. Proteins are polymers made up of amino acids. So the amino acids are the building blocks to make up proteins. Amino acids, there's 20 different kinds. they're composed of an amino group at one end and a carboxyl group at the other end. So the amino group is the NH2, and the carboxyl group is the COOH. And the R is a side chain, and the R, what is in that R side chain is what gives each amino acid its specific properties. So to make a protein involves making peptide bonds, joining amino acids together at the carboxyl and the amino group ends, and water is given off. So you can see there's the peptide bond formed by joining these two amino acids. The functions of proteins include controlling rates of reactions. Enzymes are primarily what does that. Regulating cell processes, like hormones do that. Forming cell structures. Lots of structure in our body are proteins. Transportation, like things like hemoglobin transports oxygen and so on. And helping to fight diseases, the antibodies and things like that. So protein structure, so the amino acids are held together by a special type of covalent bond called a peptide bond. A protein is a functional molecule built from one or more polypeptide chains. So we look at protein structure at different levels. The simplest level is the primary structure, which is just a list of the amino acids in the correct order. The secondary structure is folding or coiling of the peptide chain due to hydrogen bonds. Tertiary structure is the 3D shape of the polypeptide chain, and it's primarily due to interactions with water. There are parts that like water, they're going to be on the outside, and parts that don't like water, they're going to be on the inside. And then when you combine multiple polypeptide chains to make a complete protein, like the hemoglobin molecule here, that's the quaternary structure.